Hi, my name's Phil Craig. I'm the leader of the Referendum Party, and welcome to our first ever go live session on Facebook. This is the first time we're doing with this. We've logged in a little bit early so that we can get everybody online here. Look, please bear with us. I am not a technical genius. I have a team of people who are now about to help us. I'm first of all just going to ask my colleague from the CIG, Renee Pretorius, to join us. So please bear with me while I do that. And I'm going to try and get that done and get Renee online before we get started. So let's have a look now. Just waiting to see if I can find for Renee. Renee, if you are watching, then please just send your request now. And I'm going to try and see where we get to here. Let's have a look. No, okay, I'm not picking up Renee just yet. Anyway, so she'll come. All right, look, let me just wait. I'm going to send her a message separately. Just waiting for you, Renee. No, sorry. There we go. Okay. Whilst we are, no, maybe that's now. Sorry. There we go. So let's invite Renee to join us. And then hi to, look, I see Brian, you've joined us. So thank you very much for it. No, hang on a second now. I seem to be off the top of the screen. I don't quite know how this is working. So let me just do some minor adjustments here so that I have all of my head feel for my sins. Right, great. Thanks very much. Look, let's just keep talking. We're going to start at 7, so I appreciate that we're a little early. This has gone remarkably well technically so far. That's probably very, very dangerous. Maybe I'm just going to start by saying, look, thank you so much for joining us. You guys are right in at the start. You can see at this point in time we haven't really started doing our marketing in terms of social media. We've got about 210 followers, and we've got to get ourselves up to 100,000 voters. So we've got an enormous task ahead. And look, thanks, Brian, for good luck. Appreciate that. And we really going to need each and everybody's person's help. And for us to deliver this 100,000 votes, we are going to have to build up our channels. Predominantly, we're going to use Facebook and Twitter and TikTok and Instagram. We're going to have to build up an on-the-ground branch network. That very much is what we want to do, and where we're going to start. We're going to start here, look, we'll try to run these sessions regularly. And then please just contact us. Put us onto contact us by email. Put notes and send messages on our Facebook page. Please give us suggestions in terms of how we need you to help us, and we're very open to suggestions in terms of the best way for us to get this message out. Are there questions you need answering? Must there be other questions on our website? Do we need to organise sessions at a different time? We're here to spread the word, and this we're going to do together. Renee, let me just hand over to you, and I think at some point let's talk about that legal question we were talking about earlier. So I don't know whether we take that first or later, but one of the questions that we've been talking about a bit today, a lot of people say, is Cape independence legally possible? Can it be achieved? Is it viable? And of course, it absolutely is. But it's important that we explain to people what that process is. Now we can do that now or later. I'm not going to share any longer. I'm going to hand over to Renee. For those that don't know Renee was one of my fellow co-founders at the Cape Independence Advocacy Group. She's been here right from the start. When we've set up the Referendum Party, which of course is a CIG project effectively, I have stepped down as the official spokesperson for the CIG because I can't fulfill both roles. And Renee has kindly stepped in and is now the official spokesperson for the CIG. So again, thanks for that, Renee. Look, we obviously know each other well as partners, but thank you so much for everything you've done. And I'm going to hand the chair over to you now.
Oh, thank you so much, Phil. I was going to start and say good evening, Phil, and introduce everybody, but you've done the introductions. But I also just want to say good evening, Phil, and thank you so much for everybody who's joining us here tonight. So again, my name is Dr. Renee Pretorius from the CIAG, and this is Phil Craig, my co-founder at the CIAG, and also now the leader of the recently formed Referendum Party. So due to the many questions that we received after the launch, we thought it would be a good idea to just create an opportunity for Phil to reply to some of these questions. And so people are more than welcome to ask your questions in the chat or the comments below. So while we are waiting for some questions, Phil, maybe you can we can cover a few questions that have already been asked quite a few times. Firstly, this has probably been a hectic few days for you after the launch of the party, hasn't it?
It's been totally insane. Yes, I think I still have a wife, and I hope to check in shortly. And for those that my wife, I'm married to an absolutely fantastic Afrikaans lady, Jonah, and with many children between us. But we've got 3 in the house, and we have a hectic family life. And behind every man is a great woman, and that's absolutely the case. And I am eternally grateful to Jonah, and I hope at some point to catch back up with her. But yes, it's been a bit insane.
Oh, okay. Now, so firstly, the name referendum is in your party's name, but many people are still unsure of exactly what the word referendum even means. So can you maybe just elaborate on, you are now the leader of the Referendum Party, but what exactly is a referendum?
Hang on a second. Jack, sorry, I'm just getting some instructions that apparently on the screen this is not appearing the way it should. A bit higher. Just 1 second. No, it's different.
That's good.
Is that better? Is it? Okay.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you. Let's see that. Fantastic. Thank you. Right. With all that thing. So, in terms of a referendum, what's a referendum? So, and in many ways, what's the difference between a referendum and an election? So, a referendum is just is effectively a democratic means of which to ask people one single question. So when you vote in an election, you vote across a whole range of issues. You may not agree with the DA on every issue or the Freedom Front Plus on every issue, but on balance, you say, well, across a full range of policies, these people reflect my interests the best of everybody that's available. And to a certain extent, that's a compromise, and that's how we decide who our government is. And a referendum is different. A referendum is a single question, a very solitary question, and it transcends, crosses over party bounds, because often when we come to single issues, then we don't necessarily vote along party lines. So a referendum is a simple question that says, look, what do you feel as the Western Cape people in this context on this one single question? Do you want the Western Cape to be independent or not? Yes or no? And actually there may be DA voters who say yes and DA voters who say no, and Freedom Front voters that say yes and Freedom Front voters that say no, and actually allows us to sort of transcend these party lines and just get a balance of everybody outside of party politics. And that's a referendum, and that is the accepted means by which a people say, do they want independence, yes or no?
Very well answered. Thank you so much for that, Phil. There are quite a few questions about referendums, but we'll get to them a bit later. Firstly, let's just talk about maybe the party itself first. Why was the Referendum Party formed?
No, look, a great question. So the Referendum Party, in many ways, we're reluctant politicians, as you know, because we were together in the CIG and still are together in the CIG. Our mission was primarily a lobby group. We're not interested in political power. We don't want to run the Western Cape. We don't want to run an independent Western Cape. What we want is to say, right, hang on a second, this isn't working, that in the Western Cape, voters outside of the province are making all of the decisions. It's not the DA, it's not the Western Cape that is electing an ANC government. The Western Cape is doing everything it can to not elect an ANC government, but it's getting one because there's more voters outside the province than there are in, and therefore we don't get what we want. And our role as the CIG previously was to lobby to try and say, look, let's just get the political parties to fight for Cape independence, so that the Western Cape people can take control of their own destiny and make that decision. So at least the Western Cape government, the Western Cape people choose the Western Cape government, and or a government that actually has then power to do the things that it wants. I probably answered that a bit messily, but so that's kind of the starting point. And obviously the DA are the government of the Western Cape that have been for 3 terms, and actually in one way or another they'll still be for this next term. And I think most people accept that whilst they've got their faults, they've done a relatively good job on balance. So I don't, we know in terms of Cape independent supporters, they certainly don't all support the DA. Some of them are very, very disappointed with the DA. But actually, when we do polling, we know consistently about 7 out of 10 Western Cape voters support the DA. So we pushed the DA. We worked very, very closely with the DA, and in fact, we secured from them this promise in 2021. They would call a referendum on Cape independence, and this, of course, was the perfect situation the perfect situation for us to then consider. We don't have to make this about a election. We don't have to make this about party politics. But actually, what we can simply do is force the DA to call this referendum. So, and we were successful in doing so. The net result is they never kept that promise. And here we arrived ourselves coming up to the 2024 elections. We went back to the DA. We said, look, you made this promise to us. Are you now going to keep this promise? The DA said no, they're not going to keep the promise. We obviously put them under some pressure to do that. And ultimately, then we had to say, well, what do we do? Do we just accept that the DA is not going to act in the best interest of the Western Cape people and deny us democracy? Or are we going to now, up the ante and effectively respond? And we had little choice there. We certainly weren't going to walk away. It's not in our nature, as you well know. So what have we done is we have decided that we're going to put on this political party, and we're trying to force the DA to call this referendum. And critically, we've got an unusual proposition as a referendum party. Our proposition is this: look, we'll keep the DA in power. We hear you. We hear that 7 out of 10 Cape Independent supporters want a DA government. So we're not going to try and remove the DA government. In fact, we'll promise not to. We'll promise to vote with the DA, so that actually you don't have to worry about, if I vote for Cape Independence, will that allow the ANC back into power? But actually, we tag on there that we're going to get this referendum. So effectively, a vote for the referendum party is a vote for a continuation of a DA government in the Western Cape, and we'll promise that, but also a referendum on Cape independence. And for those people that say, well, look, hang on a second, but I don't really want a DA government, that's fine. At the end of the day, we're trying to sort of allow options here for Western Cape independent supporters. So actually, if you'd rather have a Freedom Front Plus government, great, go and vote for the Freedom Front Plus. They're not our enemies, they're allies. You're then one of the 3 out of 10 that don't want a DA government, and you're already well served, and that's great. It's just important that you vote for Cape independence. But if you're one of the 7 out of 10 who do want a DA government, then actually, effectively, we are allowing you now to vote for your present in terms of having a DA government, and your future in terms of having a referendum on Cape independence.
Thanks so much for that answer, because that's one of the questions that a lot of people have is, I really want Cape independence, but I don't want to risk not voting for the DA. So I think you've answered that one. I think it's a very, very important point that you just made. All right, so we've got a question here from Muammar Rabello. He wants to know, has the DA reacted with news of the launch of the Referendum Party?
So yes, ironically, good question, and they haven't. So what they've done. Look, at this point in time, you can imagine we had regular contact with the DA for a long time. At this point in time, things are a little awkward. They would have definitely preferred that we wouldn't have launched the Referendum Party, and we had that little squabble over the perhaps those have followed on Twitter over the use of the DA logo, where they threatened to take us to court, and we stood our ground, and they backed down. So, but I mean, effectively, that those things will come and go. Yes, the DA have responded, and they've responded in every possible channel to the people to say they're really not bothered about the Referendum Party. What's quite, what is quite fascinating is in each of those cases, nobody's been talking about the Referendum Party. So the DA have actually got out of the way to say, no, look, we not worried about the Referendum Party. It's not very interesting, but I was offering you a prawn cocktail, So clearly it's on their mind, and I think one of the, which is great. And if you saw the DA's Western Cape government, Western Cape campaign launch this week, it's quite fascinating and very telling. The very first thing out of John Steenhuisen's mouth, when we're in government, national government, of course the DA is not going to be national government, but that's fine. When we're in national government, our very, very first action will be bring a devolution act to grant devolved powers to the Western Cape. So that can tell you where the DA space is. And the DA space is very much that, hang on a second, we have got to respond to this movement. They know the they know from their own polling how much support there is for Cape independence. So far, they've been able to sort of keep that outside of the electoral space, but in denying the referendum, they've obviously brought it into the electoral space. And look, so of course they're wary of it, and it's up for us to now to make sure that really does tell. We can bring pressure to bear.
Thanks. We have questions coming in. So the next one is from Chris Aldrich. His question is, assuming that the referendum does in fact take place, and given that the Referendum Party is a single issue party, what role do you see for the Referendum Party in the provincial political landscape after the referendum has been held?
Look, a great question. So what are we? Effectively, I guess we then become a pressure group. We're really not interested in political power. You know, we have no political ambitions. None of us. We are there to deliver Cape independence. And actually, one of the critical aspects. So there are going to be a few points. Getting the referendum is obviously a critical issue. Ironically, South Africa is in a really privileged position in that we have this right for premiers to call a referendum. So many other countries, they have to fight to get the referendum from the national government. We are in this great position that our constitution means we don't have to fight the national government to get a referendum. We've only got to make our own premier listen to us, and that shouldn't be an issue. It is an issue in South Africa, and obviously that's why we're here. So the first part of it is fairly easily done. Then what happens? We get the referendum. Well, it looks from polling at this point in time that we would win a referendum fairly comfortably, and that's very encouraging. So then we come to exactly this question you're talking about: what happens next? And what happens next is there's a negotiation. It has to be a negotiation between the Western Cape government, which is the elected representative of the Western Cape people, and they will have then called for the referendum, and now effectively they're going to be obliged to abide by the outcome. So you're going to have the Western Cape government now having held a referendum, found out the Western Cape people want Cape independence, and now they're mandated, they're required to go and try and deliver the outcome of that referendum in negotiations with national government. You're going to have the national government who, often people say, look, how are they going to respond? And they're just going to ignore it. It really isn't that simple. It's sort of real politics to say, you just can't ignore the outcome of a referendum. You certainly can't in terms of international law and protocol. There's going to be huge pressure from the outside world. There's going to be huge pressure internally. So there will be a negotiation. And I think then the key role to play with people like ourselves and other people in the independent space is to make sure that in that negotiation we get a really, really good outcome. The Cape independence is not just something in itself. We want that because we want to have a country that we can be proud of, that's going to be successful, it's going to be in the first world, and we're going to have to make sure that those negotiations are conducted in a sensible manner, and that actually we get an outcome that we are happy with, that is in our best interest. So very much we'll be on the inside of the system fighting for the type of Cape independence that we want, and that's going to be a difficult set of negotiations, but I think actually a very, very positive one. And I think all parties, including the South African national government, have a very positive role to play in those negotiations. Because ultimately, once the referendum takes place and we've won, Cape independence almost becomes an inevitability at that point in time. And now we say, well, how are we going to make this work for both parties, which we absolutely want to happen? We don't want to sort of have a winner and a loser. We want to win. We want South Africa to win. And we want to end up creating a solution that gives both ideological groups, let's call the South African ideological group, the Western Cape ideological group, a result that we're happy with and that we can live with, and then allow us to be prosperous and good neighbours moving forward.
All right, so the next question that we have is from the Cape Independence Group, the CIG. Please explain why you're standing nationally and not just in the Western Cape.
Well, I think they're a good question, very good question. So there are two reasons for that. First of all, there's a massive amount of support for Cape independence outside of the Western Cape. So in the first instance, there's a whole lot of people who want to vote for Cape independence. They see their long-term future in the Cape. We've got to see the Western Cape. The Cape independence is what's called civic nationalism. It's the formation of a country around a set of ideologies and values. In other words, we vote differently because we want to be governed differently. There are a lot of people in South Africa who absolutely share our values and want to be part of our project. Renee, you're one of them. You live, for people who don't know, Renee lives outside of the Western Cape, yet she fights for Cape independence, and she knows she'll end up in the Western Cape because actually, ideologically, this is going to be her homeland. And therefore, there are an awful lot of other people who are going to do the same thing. So first of all, there's a whole lot of voters who want to vote for Cape independence, and for the first time, there's going to be somebody on the national ballot where they can. And then secondly, having somebody in Parliament, let's just think that through. You imagine you watch on TV and you see Julius Malema having a fight with Cyril Ramaphosa and John Steenhuisen. Imagine somebody in that mix, promoting Cape independence, pushing Cape independence, absolutely will turn South African politics on its head, and they will absolutely hate us. And in hating us, they're going to help us. They're going to drive interest in our cause. And then there are some, finally, there are some legislative things we want to do. And one of them is we want to table a change to the South African Constitution, which allows citizens to instigate referendums. So we can only do that in the national parliament. and we want to follow the New Zealand system, and effectively that would allow us to stop premiers becoming a roadblock to democracy, which is where we've got in the Western Cape. We've got the right to call a referendum is supposed to be half of the Western Cape people. We know from polling that 68% of Western Cape people support holding a referendum. Other people have polled that too and got similar results, so we know it's the truth. But actually, despite all of that, Alan Winde says, well, he doesn't believe in Cape independence, so he's not going to call a referendum. And that's not what's supposed to happen. So actually, this effectively stops that. It stops the likes of Alan Winde denying the Western Cape people democracy. And shame on Alan Winde for doing that. We'll table that. Now, actually, who knows whether we'll get that through or not, but at very least, if we get it through, then fantastic. And it may be that other parties say, well, look, you know what, this might be a good idea to allow citizens to have more control in their own democracy. But even if we don't get it through, what we'll absolutely do, we'll throw a huge spotlight on the Western Cape and Alan Winde and highlight the fact that we have a problem with a premier who is not willing to listen to the people who's elected to serve.
All right, then we have a question from Andy Wins. Is it thinkable that the DA forms a coalition, say with the ANC provincially, in exchange for doing the same nationally, given Helen Zille's utterings about a national coalition being the best of bad options to save South Africa?
Look, so first of all, we can't control what the DA are going to do, but I think that'd be extraordinarily unlikely. I think on a national stage, I think there's a very real prospect of a DA-ANC national government, because they won't have any other choice. Effectively, I think they're going to end up in a situation, and it's always been the case, that the South African national government will effectively be drawn from two of the DA, the ANC, and the EFF. The DA aren't going to go with the EFF. The ANC are going to have to choose between the two, and I think increasingly it's looking likely that perhaps it will be an ANC-DA government, which, you know, I don't know how to feel about that, quite honestly. I mean, I think the fact that the system forces that is a problem in itself, and I think it will be an extraordinarily difficult and unstable government. Whether that will be the case or we end up with an EFF, the ANC government shortly after, who knows. In the Western Cape, that's not going to be the case. You know, if we get the DA under 50%, which is a goal, you know, we're probably going to get them. We want to get them to 48%. You know, but they're not going to be massively under. They're not going to need to go into government with the ANC, because effectively the Referendum Party and the Freedom Front Plus, ACDP, you know, are natural allies for the DA. You know, we are all kind of centre right, broadly speaking. You know, we all want democracy. We all want to have the devolution of powers. So we're very, very, and actually, you know, if you look at the Referendum Party, we're asking for very little. We're just asking for the referendum that they promised once already. So you know, I think it would be extraordinarily unlikely that the DA would do that. I think it would be political suicide. But I mean, obviously, we can't control that. It's not something we control ourselves.
Yes. The next question is from Rian Brandt. His question is, how strong do you foresee your marketing campaign to be in specific and to skeptical and traditional DA voters? I think you already touched on that, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit more for Rian, if you want.
I kind of missed that. I keep seeing these comments from this idiot corner. If somebody can just kick him off, please do. At the end of the day, we're trying to have a constructive discussion corner. You're not adding anything, so why don't you just disappear off and leave us to have a constructive conversation? Thank you. Ask me the question again, please, Renee.
The question was from Rian Brandt, and it touched upon something that you already actually answered earlier, but I'll ask it again, and maybe you can just elaborate a bit more. How strong do you foresee your marketing campaign to be in specific and to skeptical and traditional DA voters? You touched on that, but maybe you can just reiterate what you said.
No, look. So look, it's a huge challenge. Let's not misunderstand anything. To convince 100,000 people is an aggregate. It's 2 Cape Town stadiums full of voters, and you know, it's a huge task. And yeah, we understand that. We've got a strategy. We hope it's a strategy that's going to work. You know, we're uncharted territories. Nobody's ever run a campaign like our campaign. What we've done, we've identified the profile of voters who are most strongly in support of Cape independence. We've done that using 3 years worth of polling data. We then identified those people by name in the electoral roll, and that's come down to about 800 people who fall in our slot. And now we will specifically target those people on through social media and other means to try and deliver our message to them. So we won't be marketing to 3.1 million Western Cape voters. We'll be marketing to 800,000 Western Cape voters who we believe are those that are most likely, with the hope that then we're going to get down to 100,000. But we've got this message that we think makes sense. We've run professional polling groups to understand what people feel and what's not. And interesting, the polling groups have been very, very fascinating. What they've ended up with is what can I say? Maybe I should just, it's not very interesting to talk about those focus groups and give people some insight in terms of what actually happened. So we started off in those focus groups, and we said to people, first of all, look, they didn't know why they were here, but they were selected because they were DA voters and that they broadly supported Cape independence. So then, but they don't know that. They're in a room, they don't know why they're being spoken to, but they've agreed to come, and now they're in these professional groups. And the first thing we did was ask people, well, look, why do you vote, and who do you vote for, and why do you vote for that party? Well, they didn't know they were all DA voters. We obviously knew they were all DA voters. And actually, at that point in time, the DA was absolutely passionate about voting DA. We asked them, would you consider voting for another party? No, nobody wanted to vote for another party. They thought the DA did a great job in government. When their pipes burst, somebody came and fixed it. If their street light went out, they could call on somebody, and they were really happy with the DA. We then said to them, look, okay, let's just put that to one side again for a second now, and let's just talk about what future you want. And so just imagine, allow yourself to imagine that you now can describe this ideal country that you want to live in. How would the Western Cape look in your dreams in 10 years' time? And people like that. Well, I think the roads would be perfect, our schools would be better, the hospitals would work well, unemployment would be less, we wouldn't have so many migrants everywhere, law and order, it would be safer. And effectively, they described a first world country. And at the end of it, we were able to say, well, look, can we describe that as a first world country? And they said, yeah, it's exactly what they wanted. But the next question, the focus groups was, well, do you think if you keep voting DA, you're going to get that future, the future that you want? And actually, in the focus groups, then to a man, a woman, forgive the expression, was the realization that, well, no, the DA are very good at taking care of our present. But actually, no, we're not going to get the future we want for the DA because they just don't have the powers to do it, and the national government controls this, and Becky Shelley's in charge of police, and so on and so forth. And then we said, well, okay, what would give you that future that you wanted? And often it was fascinating. It depended on the dynamics of the group. Sooner or later, somebody would always shyly say, well, go Cape Independence, because again, they didn't know they all were sympathetic to Cape Independence. Somebody would say, well, what about Cape Independence? And that muttering would join in the group, and more people would say, well, that could work. And in some groups, that just then people accepted, okay, well, we've got to have Cape Independence. In other groups, you would have somebody who then were actually against Cape Independence, which wasn't supposed to be in the group, but it was a fascinating dynamic, because as soon as the first person spoke up and said, well, what about Cape Independence? If the next person spoke up and said, no, we can't do that, then the first person almost always climbed back into their shell, and that was the end of the discussion of Cape Independence. It was very fascinating to see that actually people were waiting for other people to say it was okay to like Cape Independence. But any of the groups where somebody didn't, and that was most of the groups, that actually people quickly then made the connection. So when we talked about our present, they wanted a DA government. When we talked about our future, but then all of a sudden people wanted were able to make this connection that if they wanted the future they wanted, then it's Cape Independence. And so that was quite a fascinating thing, and that perhaps helps form what our marketing does. What are we doing? We're selling people onto this future. Let the DA take care of your present, but actually vote for the future that you really want. And actually the lesson for the thing is, don't let the loudmouth in the corner put you off the idea that is going to deliver you the future that you want.
Yes, that is fascinating. We have quite a few questions and we've almost run out of time. So let's see how many we can get through. Rowan Williams wants to know, I think this was partially answered just now, but it's about financial clout to drive voter education. And if not, where the funding is expected to come from for marketing.
Sure. So look, great question. Funding is an absolute nightmare for a political party. Elections are largely a function of how much you can spend to get your message out to the database. And at this point in time, where are we as a party? We have what I would describe as, for a party like ours, a relatively sizable budget. We have some significant donors, including one specific, well, more than one, but one specific donor who has guaranteed that budget to us, and we're extraordinarily grateful for that. And obviously, we'll receive payments through the campaign. So at this point in time, we're looking fairly good, but that's the sort of starting point of this mission, can I say? We constantly will keep on fundraising, because the more money you spend on marketing, the more people you get your message to, the more people you get your message to, the more people that will vote. So for anybody who has got connections or is able to help with fundraising or able to make donations, please just help us. That is the life, but that is the petrol that a political party runs on. None of that. If people ever wonder, most of the people who are involved in Cape Independence are not paid at all. Those that are paid because they literally got to the point where they can't do any of the job are paid a pittance in real terms, and far less than they could earn elsewhere. We do this because we desperately want to do it, and we certainly don't do it for financial gain.
Yeah, that's true. The next question, I think, is one that you'll probably be able to answer quite easily, and then we can continue with the other questions. So the next question again is from Rian Brand. This question is about the current Palestine issue and whether or not that highlights self-determination internationally, and how this would affect, how the ANC support of Palestinian self-determination affect our call on exactly the same issue.
Yeah, look, I'm just going to say, look, we're a single issue party. We're focused on Cape Independence, and actually we've kind of stayed away from the Palestine-Israel issue. And I say it on a purely pragmatic view. We first of all understand that we've got this terrible conflict in the Middle East. It's gone on for about 70 or 80 years. The world's diplomats have never been able to solve it. And actually, we've got a huge task on for Cape Independence, and trying to involve ourselves in somebody else's conflict on top of Cape Independence would just be insanity. And obviously, in terms of the Western Cape electorate, now there are people who have an affinity for Palestine. There are people who have an affinity for Israel. And ideologically, let me just give you a general answer. Our entire movement is based on the basis that all people have the right to self-determination, and that means all people on all sides. And whether they're people who we feel an affinity for or we don't feel an affinity for is almost irrelevant. It's a right. And actually, the whole point about rights is they apply to everybody. So I'll give a general answer, but I'm not going to get into the Israel. And actually, for those, just in case, on our team, we have got Muslims, Jews, Christians, agnostics, and atheists. So we've pretty well got it covered from our side, and we wouldn't even agree on the issue.
All right. The next question is again from Robin Rubain, maybe Fudge. Are DA reps still holding their party line? Any sneaky approaches to the Referendum Party yet?
No, so no. Look, I think it's too early for that. I think it'll be interesting to see what the DA are going to do. Look, I think as I alluded to earlier, clearly it's in the DA's mirrors at this point in time. We're a brand new political party. We're less than a week old. We haven't started to make inroads into the electorate. I think when that's likely to happen is when we start to get momentum. And once we start to get momentum, and this sort of turns into a movement that becomes noticeable to the DA in the real world, then I think that's the point in time where things will start to look a little different.
All right, then the last question, I think probably the last or second last question might be from Chris Aldrich again. As a voter being asked to vote in a referendum on independence for the Western Cape, where can I get information on the viability or feasibility of the Western Cape as a national unit? I'm thinking of research that has considered issues typically handled by sovereign countries such as National Defence Force, border control, diplomatic representation, electricity, revenue collection, etc. Will you make research available to voters? So it's about feasibility, really. And
I think it's a very, very fair question. And the honest answer is Cape Independence is a leap of faith. And I'm going to say that with all honesty. Is there research available in many different areas? Yes, there is. You have to understand that as an organisation, we are not a huge organisation. The CIG was smaller, the Referendum Party is a bit bigger. And and actually we can answer everybody's questions and there'll still be more. So to a certain extent where I think it's fair to ask that, well, it's fair to ask any question, let me not sound fair, bad choice of words on my side, but I think, we can deal with the big stuff, we can kind of deal with the conceptual stuff. So I think it's fine to look, is the Cape Independence economically viable? And you can go and get that data very, very easily. You can go and look at the Treasury data, we can look at the SARS data, we can look at the Westgrows data, and it becomes very, very apparent the Western Cape is one of 2 provinces that contribute to South Africa, the other 7 draw down, and without question the Western Cape is economically viable. We can have this conversation that says, well, look, can you defend your border? Which I always think is a bit of a bizarre question, living in a country that effectively hasn't got a border. And often to say, look, let's just start off by saying, well, we couldn't possibly do a worse job of defending our border than South Africa. But I mean, defending a border actually isn't really that big a challenge. The challenge becomes the trade-off between defending your border and how much freedom do you have. Effectively, we can impose a system in any country where the government has total control over all economic activity. Anybody who isn't legally can't buy anything, sell anything, or do anything. And that would give you phenomenal control. But actually, you'd be living in a police state, and is that what we're fighting for Cape Independence? So there's going to be compromises. So I accept all of these things. And I think if people want to come out of the space and do research, and at times that's happened. So for example, well, unfortunately, they've been published, but AfriForum did an economic research study on the Western Cape, which is heavily positive in favour of the Western Cape. It's never been published, and obviously we're not in a position to publish it. And there are other people have done research, and actually we would love to see more. At one time we toyed with the Research Institute, but we just don't have the capacity. I think it's great when people when these things do come out. But actually, at the end of all of that, you can read all of the facts. The bottom line is, and that's helpful, but it comes down to common sense. Let's look at the basics, and then we're talking in the Referendum Party. We've kind of got 4 talking points: economic policy, taxation, policing, and borders and immigration. Let's look at economic policy. Do you want to have it controlled in current by the Western Cape government under the DA, or do you want the ANC national government as an economic policy? Do you want Patricia de Lille's border fence and the ANC for South Africa, or do you want to do that yourself? Do you want to have an open border policy and have millions of people settling in shacks all over the Western Cape illegally, or do you want to try and close the border and at the very least limit that significantly? And in terms of tax money, what do you want to do with your tax money? Do you want to pay your tax money over to the ANC and the national government and allow them to decide how they're going to spend it? Or actually, do you want to keep it in the Western Cape and make sure we spend it ourselves and for us, so we don't give it to the ANC? Those aren't complicated questions to answer. And if we keep that at our heart, who do we want to make decisions? Ourselves in the Western Cape, or do we actually want to delegate the decisions to the ANC? And that's the crux of Cape Independence. And when you answer those questions, yes, you can do reams of research afterwards, but you really know what answer you're going to come up with before you even start.
Phil, do you want to take one more question, or do you think we close it here? Because I think we've covered most of the burning questions.
Sure. Okay, well, it's up to you. Let's take one, call it a day, and then if anybody's got other questions afterwards, we're doing another session tomorrow at 2:30 for those that couldn't make it tonight. And look, just before everybody goes, just thank you so much for joining us. I know I really appreciate it. And help us, please. Help us spread this party, share, get people onto our page, talk to your friends about the Referendum Party. We cannot do this alone. And look, you guys are here right at the start. I really appreciate that. It's fantastic. Thank you. And look, just help us build this party, because it's our party. This is about giving the Western Cape people a voice, and it's a voice that is going to save us. So thank you, and we really appreciate it. Take one question, and then we. All right.
So the last question is. Sorry. So the last question is basically just somebody who wants to know exactly what your relationship is with the DA.
Okay. Look, so our relationship with it is so first of all, we often get this. We have no formal relationship with the DA whatsoever. We certainly aren't funded for the DA. We're not a front for the DA. We're not stooges for the DA. In fact, at this point in time, we're probably extraordinarily unpopular at the DA. Personally, and with the CIG, we over the time we have built relationships with with the DA, because the DA are responsible for calling a referendum on Cape independence, and they're the people we need to put pressure on. And at times that's been a good relationship, and I suspect in times again it'll be a good relationship. It's strained now, because actually I think the DA probably thought that they had us tied it up into a bag. They gave us this promise. We did the devolution working group together. We helped work with them to try and deliver some of these devolution goals, but on the basis that the Cape independence referendum was coming. And I think perhaps the DA thought they had us contained, and then the Cape independence was dying away. And obviously, when we then started to press the issue ahead of 2024 and say, right, time now to make good on that promise, the DA then were much reluctant to do that, and we said, well, look, that's a hard line in the sand for us. No referendum on Cape independence means the end of this effective cooperation. Here we are now, then we're going back, and we are now going to push hell for leather, because that actually is our primary purpose. So yeah, that's the reality. Have the basis of good relationships. We have built up good relationships in the past. There will be good relationships in the future, but right now we are political adversaries, and actually, they're the bullseye on our dartboard. That's the reality, or particularly Alan Windy is.
Thank you so much, Phil. Thank you so much again. Phil already mentioned it, but thank you so much for everybody who joined us here tonight. So just from the CIAG side, we're very excited to see this new role player in the political arena, and since we strongly believe that people do need to be given the right to choose their own destiny. So thank you so much, Phil. With that, I think, as Phil said, please get involved. Please talk about Cape independence and share the hope of an independent, prosperous, independent Cape here at the southern tip of Africa, not only for us, but also for our children and many generations after them. Anything from your side, Phil? Otherwise, we can conclude.
No, just look, thank you. Thanks, Renee. Thanks to everybody, and we'll catch you again, no doubt. Great to see some old friends on the comment section. So thank you. Bye now.
Goodbye.